Okay. Thank you very much, Victor Vogel. Welcome back to part two, follow up on customer service conversation. I know from what we had on our last session, which we talked about customer experience, which was very inciting and very educating. And we had to look at different scenario, which talked about the supervisors and also from the customer perspective in every business and organization. And today, we'll be looking at things from a very different perspective, which we'll be looking at it from the book which we have from Victor, talking about become a Renaissance leader. And this has a whole lot to do with customer experience, customer support, and how organizations can actually train and groom good leaders, not just to come and speak word for word as in script, but also to be able to, from their own perspective, generate good quality services for their customers. And I'm sure Victor here today has a whole lot of stuff for us. And I know he's going to continue to give quality information and updates to our growing audience and see how we can share with that together. So thank you very much, Victor, for having me today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so from the last session, like I said, we looked at interpersonal communication and perspectives, and we cut across different aspects, where communication goes through either video calls or audio calls with your customers or your consumers or your end users or whatever I might call them. But for today, like we said, we'll be looking at a different approach still under the consumer base. And Victor has his book here to share with us titled Become a Renaissance Leader, which we will both soon have access to, go read or stream or watch it on YouTube or wherever the case to be. So please, Victor, how do you intend to bring these two topics together? Last time we talked about customer experience, and today we are looking at the Renaissance Leader. How do you want to explain briefly what a Renaissance leader looks like, and what does your book have to offer with customers, and how we can grow our business if we had to bring these two things together?
That's great. Let me take a moment and sort of tie this together for you. The book is Become a Renaissance Leader. Now, a Renaissance leader is not a new term. It's been around for a while. But it really talks about a leader who can handle a multiplicity of things. Now, Renaissance is known for its innovation, its creativity, its learning world. It dates back to, thousands of years. But the idea that a leader is focused around growing both personally and growing others for a long period of time over the ages, we begin to develop and evolve and be better at what we do. So becoming a Renaissance leader is focused on helping people create new, innovative, different kinds of things that go on. So, when I think about that customer service side of it, what was happening from the last time we talked, we didn't get a chance to go into this in depth, as a customer service representative, really, they get kind of hit from both sides, particularly the first point of contact customer service person. What's happening is the customer may call in, and they already call in with a problem. So you start with a negative premise to start with, and on top of that, they may really be mad or upset. So the customer service representative, the question is, are we training those people to handle that kind of person, to diffuse that anger, to help that person, to calm those saboteurs, those parts of their brain while they're trying to express their frustration and anger and difficulty, or in some cases, fear that they can't get the problem solved or whatever it is, and start thinking in terms of how can we get this to a solution that's going to make you feel better. Now, does a customer service person get the training to help that person to do that? Would be one example. Now, think about, I said that's what the customer facing side. Now, when you turn around and think about what normally goes on in a customer service center, at least for me talking to customer, it's kind of informal, not a statistical study. And not everybody handles it this way. But generally speaking, when I talk to a lot of customer service representatives, this isn't a job they're having fun with. It's normally a job that they take and they need for an income. A lot of times they don't see it as their long-time goal in life. Okay. So the way that they are managed from the other side, not the customer side, but the other side is
that's the side of the business, right?
Yeah, the side of the business. That is where the supervisor or the manager comes in. And what I found talking with these people is the criteria of that interface is task driven. It is segmented in things like really there's probably two criteria that they're evaluated on that supervisors in the company tend to use, and that is the average time somebody spends with a customer. And the other one is that survey that you're always asked to take at the end of every customer service call you take as a customer.
How many people often take these surveys, you know?
Yeah, that's right. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. When I take these, now, if it happens to be something I think is going to be resolved fairly easy, I call in and say, look, can you help me figure out how to set my alarm clock on my iPhone? And they go, sure, I think I can help you with that. And they say, now you got your iPhone? Yeah. And they walk me through that. And I go, hey, that's great. Thanks. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you later. And they go, well, there's a survey. And I said, I'll talk to you later. See, I'm not going to take a survey behind that. So what happens is the only time surveys are not the only time, got to qualify myself. A lot of the times, the only time surveys are done is when somebody is not satisfied with it. So the example that I use is a guy who helped me with a billing problem, and it was with a phone company, and the billing problem was horrendous, and it wasn't my fault. It was a multiple error problem from several customer service people that got things wrong, and I ended up being charged $600, $700, $800 every month for like a $90 bill. And this was actually hitting my bank account, or it could have cut.
How did you solve that? How did you rectify that?
Well, that's what I'm getting to. This guy explained to me what I did wrong, and it was because I was changing different plans or different approach or a different phone or something. Every time you do that, your billing cycle changes, and that takes them approximately 3 months to catch you up to where it's normal. And so sometimes you're being charged more, sometimes you're being charged less. You can't predict it. You can't budget for it or anything like that. I didn't understand that. I was very frustrated, very mad. This man spent an hour and a half with me on the phone, and we went through detail by detail every aspect of every situation that happened. Now, an hour and a half is nowhere near the average time for a customer service with a billing problem. Okay. So
should be probably 15 minutes or so.
15 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever it is. It's not an hour and a half. I can tell you that. So what's going to happen with that supervisor interface? The first thing the supervisor sees is, well, that guy's way above the average time, so that's a negative for him. The problem is he left me extremely satisfied as a customer. Okay. So if I didn't take that survey, there's no way for that customer supervisor, that's customer service supervisor, to know how well that employee did, except the employee told him. But the graph speaks more than, am I going to believe you? Okay. Am I going to believe you or not? Go ahead.
So I want to ask now, because speaking about the customer service personnel who helped you fix or rectify that issue, will you classify that person as a Renaissance leader, someone who who probably is learning from a good supervisor, which we don't know,
No,
or something. Yeah.
that supervisor would be the normal, the vast majority of leaders out there who are not Renaissance leaders, and not Renaissance leaders, not because they have a problem. It's because our mentality as a corporation, at least from an American perspective, is not so much focused on helping a supervisor gain the insights that you would. And we'll talk about this when I take you through the book here. And I'll just point out a couple of points. I'm not going to walk you through the whole book, so don't get excited. But the idea is that supervisor is using a task-driven versus a person-driven approach. So what I did on that survey, this is a survey I actually took, and I explained in the description of that survey, I put 5s all the way down for this person. They knowledgeable, they took their time with it, they were patient. I did a high score all the way down, but I also added a description, which most people won't take time to do in a survey. And the description said, here's a significant problem I had. Here's how this person was knowledgeable. All the points that he explained to me. Here's how his patience came out, because I was frustrated and angry. I'm not a finance person. I do not understand the whole billing delay cycle. It doesn't make sense to me as a customer, and how that phone company's process works. He took all the time to do that. I listed a detailed, and I mean, it was like a 4-paragraph description. That's what that supervisor had to go with that graph that said this person was way over the average time. But what the supervisor had was all 5 ratings and a massive description validating what this person did to help me.
And now, how they did it.
And so now the supervisor can look at that and say, well, this is kind of incongruent, but now I see why he had to take so much time and how satisfied this customer was, and they're going to stay with the company. And he's one of those persons on the profile that's been with us for 25 years. So that was the customer interface, but it's still task-driven. It's still task-driven. Suppose I hadn't done that survey. Suppose I just said, I don't have time to do the survey. And I
was just about saying, because you can imagine you taking that survey. Now I'm looking at more than 5, 10, 1,000, 2,000 customers who had the same issue, and they don't care. They just sign out. They just forget about the services, maybe AT&T, and then they move to the next service, and the same thing happened. They move to the next service. They don't just want to communicate with the customer personnel and know, oh, how can you help me fix this?
Right.
You understand what I mean, right?
Yeah. And so the question becomes, the customer service person, they're kind of pressured from both ends. I mean, so you got to ask yourself, how enjoyable of a job can that be, really? Now, maybe there's some people out there that have what it takes. So, but most of the time, I found that the perception of the company is that they, excuse me, I have allergies in Oklahoma.
Sorry.
They have they have a company who professes a culture down to the supervisor that says, well, if you can't bring, if this happens significant amount of time or too many times, whatever the norm is, I'm just going to fire you. And because I can find somebody, is there somebody out there who wants to be a customer service rep? Some of those remote people all over the world want to be a customer service rep. I got plenty of them applying. I'll just replace you. Now, the problem with that is, it's a financial and a task-driven performance assessment, and it may be even reasonable for the company to do that, but it takes no consideration into that person. Okay. Or and then you begin to have a turnover problem, and then you have money associated with that, and all the things that go on. So that's a standard leadership role that we see in organizations like that, a service-related business or retail business, etc. So that guy, those kinds of things and a lot of other things got me thinking, maybe what we're teaching in leadership development or what we're trying to show people, we're talking about a lot of skills like empathy. But when you use a graph and there's no survey to attach that graph, you're probably not using a lot of empathy to discuss the problem with that employee, even though they're coming back saying, I was just trying to help the guy. I was just trying to help him be a good, so he would stay with the company. So leadership tends to be focused on a business-driven perspective as opposed to a person-driven perspective. That's not all companies by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a lot of them. It's a lot of them. And that's definitely something that has to be done, because there's an argument to be made that if we have people like that all the time, we'd either have to hire thousands of more customer service reps to hit our, to make everybody happy, a customer happy out there, or we consider turnover a cost of doing business because it's on the expense side of the ledger. Most people don't see that as much as they see the other side, profits. So the problem becomes there is an approach that I think makes sense from a leadership side, and that's where this Renaissance side comes in. Now there's several aspects of this that when we talk about the book in a second, you're going to see relate to a supervisor, even relate to that customer service representative. So why I use this format, this is an ebook. It's going to be out on Apple. And so
is that why you'll be publishing it first on Apple Books?
Yeah. So one of those is this.
Yeah. I was sitting on the bar stool at the outside bar at my favorite restaurant facing the lake, watching the sunset. And the colors are really beautiful and they're soothing. There is something really therapeutic about sipping on my perfect Manhattan, listening to the band, and enjoying the bartenders and the people around me. I thought, this is so much different than a month ago, when the bartenders were polite but abrupt, almost too professional. I wasn't used to that feeling, and it made it difficult for me to relax. And this used to be one of the places where I could lay back and contemplate things, meditate, so to speak. But just a month ago, you could cut the tension in the air with a knife. I knew the bartender for over 4 years while she was going to college. She worked at the restaurant. It wasn't like Margot to be tense and short in our conversations. It wasn't hard to tell from her nonverbal communication that something bothered her. We had a pretty good relationship, so it was easy for me to ask her. I said, Margot, something wrong? And the next time she had a moment, she stopped and said, Meredith, the new manager, is driving us up the wall. It was clear Meredith was uncomfortable in her new position.
Okay, so I introduced this book with a story. Yeah. It's 17 minutes long.
That's a good story, though. That's a good story, and it's relatable. Yeah.
Thanks. What is unique about this is, first of all, a lot about this book is about interpersonal communication, the absolute total importance of interpersonal communication, because you do nothing. You probably didn't get up this morning without having an interpersonal conversation, either online or in person or on the phone or whatever. The story goes through Madeline, who's the manager, and I walk you through how I got Madeline to talk to me, and then be able to sit down with her later and talk to her about how to build that relationship with her bartender staff. Eventually, Madeline is promoted, and that's the end of the history. But in that, you're going to see all of the concepts that I have in this book and that one story. You might have already heard some. For example, I could tell from Margot, the bartender, her nonverbal cues, okay, and we'll see what that means here in a second, that there was a problem. So I was predicting already there's an issue
What was
here.
going to happen?
There's an issue here. And had I not said something to Margot, we may never have gotten to a point where that was resolved in that restaurant. By the way, Madeline was promoted out of that role into a general manager role down the road for it was a large restaurant chain. So this is something you can do on an ebook that I don't know that you would get that same feeling from just reading it in the story. You would probably attach your own feelings to it. You may have missed a lot of the nuances that I accentuated throughout the process. So that's one thing. So let me come up here and.
Okay, I because I feel like why I say that is related is because I feel like most outfits like bars and all of that, this should be very, very helpful to them, because we barely have good services. Where you go to have good services, or where you find good service, good customer services to yourself, if you go there, probably it's like 1 out of 10. Out of 10.
Yeah. See, I wrote this from a leadership perspective, but I'm telling you, you can apply it to your service environment. You can apply it to a church environment. You can apply it to a husband and wife relationship. It can be individuals. It can be community teams. It can be communities. It can be countries. All of these concepts, this concept we're getting around is bigger than just leadership, but it's extremely powerful from a leadership perspective role. So what this is about is right here. I call it the secret weapon. Kind of keep a James Bond approach to it, a spy story approach, but really what you have, what this is premises around is the ability to understand how to integrate and use simultaneously interpersonal communication skills, psychological knowledge and skills, and sociological. Psychological from an intro perspective, where you get to learn something about who you are, what you're about, why you are the way you are, and how to manage that effectively, which we have just in the last decade or two learned about because of the MRI technology and the neuroscience that's out there. I've seen a couple of audio shows I was doing today where there was a neuroscientist who was talking about neurology and all that. And it's people like this who are bringing this new philosophy about neuroscience and the ability to control your own mind, and do that through exercises and mental exercises, the same way you would
mental exercises.
You learn how to do this the same way you would learn how to play golf. You got to keep practicing it, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. Well, that's true about this. So that's something that I don't teach you in this, but I point you to. But it's very important you understand it's critical to this trilogy that I have here. Sociology has to do with how the context of how you interact with is the environment. It's very situational in a lot of occasions. Like I said, it could be community, it could be personal, it could be business, it could be a variety of scenarios. You have to be able to understand how emotional intelligence, which normally falls within that well, probably what we would call psychological sociology, mixed sociology. Um, how to apply what at what time in what way in the context of things. And then you have the base that I have down there, which is interpersonal communication, but you can't, if you sit in a chair, you can have all the electrodes on your brain. You can be thinking all these really wonderful thoughts and bad thoughts and how to control them. And you can do all of that sitting in your chair. It means absolutely nothing until it relates to someone else. See, so it's useless to you unless you have interpersonal communication involved. And that if there's more than one person involved, everything begins with interpersonal communication. It usually ends with interpersonal communication in some format or the other. So this book is about the integration and the use simultaneously of these concepts to evolve who you are as a leader in a way that allows you to influence others in your social context world and be able to do that highly effectively. Now, just a couple of points here on the format. So that's the book in general. You can read it if you want when it comes out. I was trying
I think this is not going to be an optional book to read. It should be like a guide to everyday's life where you can keep up to date with it.
Yeah, I have to kind of come out of this because for some reason my table of contents isn't just right yet.
Okay.
But another factor is you can put in the demonstrations like this is the communication channel. For example, most people really do not understand what goes on when two people talk to each other. Okay, so one of the features of the electronic book that I like a whole lot is, so I can be explaining to you the whole concept of the encoding, decoding, channels, verbal, nonverbal, culture, environment in terms of receiving the message, feedback, active listening, and all that. And, reading it is one thing, but here you can literally...
Let's talk about the interpersonal communication model for just a minute. Okay. This normally begins with a person, and that person has a message that they want to send.
This is 4 minutes long.
So now we'll soon have two people involved. But first, before we go there, this person's creating a message. And when they do, they're creating it using their own personal goals and values and belief systems. They then want to send this message and the meaning of it, and they want that person to understand this message on the other side via two channels, usually verbal and nonverbal communication. In this case, you can see we've sort of minimized the communication channels because we've cut out the nonverbal because we're using a telephone. So it's hard to read a nonverbal signal when you can't see it. You can hear some tone inflections, etc., but you don't see a lot of what you do if we were doing this on a video conference where you could see my video, for example. You wouldn't have eye contact and you wouldn't be able to see any kind of gestures they have. So she's already cut out a large portion of the potential message meaning by cutting out the nonverbal communication. But in this case, she didn't have any choice. He lives in Saudi Arabia. You can't just fly over there and sit down across the table and have a 30-minute conversation. So in this case, she chose the telephone. So that's what's going on here. And you have cut out some of that communication. And then once he receives that message, what you'll see here is when he gets the message, he interprets it using his values and belief system. The way we have this model set up is part of another webinar I do, but it's focusing on the idea that this person is in Saudi Arabia, she's an American woman. There are a lot of barriers in the way besides not having nonverbal communication. There are his value systems and beliefs in women, her value systems and beliefs in women, a lot of potential for conflict that can cloud the meaning of that message. So if this is all we did, she really has no idea of whether or not he heard the message effectively and believed and understood the meaning as she intended it. So consequently, she has to pay attention. She has to be an active listener. And because when he responds, he's going to respond the same way. You have the same verbal communication coming back from him using the same network, the telephone, but again, you've cut out the nonverbal communication. Now, what we know about the nonverbal communication is when you do research and ask people what they associate with the meaning, 70% of that communication is normally associated with the nonverbal cues. So she's already minimized how effective she can be. So this verbal feedback is very important because it's from the verbal feedback that she's going to receive the cues as to whether or not he understands it. So it begins a cycle. What happens here, then she, having heard the feedback from him, creates another message to further clarify depending on how much she believes he stood or understood or didn't understand. And she sends another signal, and this loop continues on as they develop the meaning together of that message, so it's very clear what they need to have happen. So this is the basic communication model that goes on every day with two people. And you can see there's a lot more complexity in this than most people are aware of.
So see how that works?
Yeah,
See?
I think this is relatable from what we talked about last on our last conversation.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like that's what brought us to having a video conversation so that we can, you know, see ourselves, understand what we're saying, know if you're communicating exactly what we should communicate with ourselves. And man, for real, this is a power-packed book. I don't know. So
Yeah.
let me know, how many pages are we expecting to have of this? Like how many page long? Let me know.
Pardon?
How many page long? Like how many pages are we expecting?
There's only going to be about 60 pages, but
that's a brief read.
The problem is it's not a problem. The benefit is you don't have to read a lot, but I'm trying to get to a point here where there is some other there's a lot explained here, but you can notice here, for example, here's a section on self-awareness and leadership, and we're talking about self-discovery of a leader. So at this point, we're talking about positive intelligence, the need to understand who you are, and you have to start with a base. So you start with a base, and you start with assessments, the ability to assess what you really know about yourself, what you really understand about yourself versus maybe what you perceive yourself. And you notice here, there's some links. So if we go here, and I'm saying other useful assessment tools include the emotional intelligence assessment. When you click on that link, it'll take you off the link of the book, but it will take you to that actual assessment. Same thing here. If you click on the positive intelligence test, it takes you to Shameen's link that actually has that test. That's a pre-test you can take, and you can identify all those negative saboteurs in your mind. Now, there's a lot he is going to market to you about why it's important you continue on with him to learn more about this. So the value of this is not so much I want to teach you about positive intelligence because that's not my expertise field. It is Shameen's expertise field. He has a tremendous program, and you can learn so much from him. But we're talking about, this is just a few. You can find your own, but these right here will tell you a whole lot about yourself. The Myers-Briggs I used for 50 years. There's pros and cons to it. But again, what we do is within the book, we're telling you, you got to have a base to start. And you got to look through those things. Here's high pressure work leaders must be attuned to psychological impacts of stress, burnout. This is a research. Most of these links are direct research-based links to research studies that talk about stress and burnout. So within the context of the book, you have a tremendous amount of things. Again, I might be able to go down. You have a tremendous.
Like I said, this is a power pack book because you don't find this on every book, so you need to have links to further research.
Yeah, a lot.
Get access to quality information.
Yeah, the value.
Information is power. Yeah.
The value is I'm not trying to teach you these other expertness in these other areas, but you have access to them, and I've taken the time to define some of the better links that are going to provide you the information about positive intelligence, emotional intelligence, interpersonal communication, and those kinds of things that will help you become more proficient in these three areas that you're going to have to integrate into each other to come up with what's called a Renaissance leader. So here's to give you an idea. A Renaissance leader is skilled in multiple areas, has many leadership capabilities. They are not limited to one style of philosophy of leadership. And I discussed transformational leadership, situational leadership. I touch on those things in the book. You can look them up and find out a lot more about each style. But a Renaissance leader is going to be able to adjust whatever leadership style is most appropriate in the context, that sociological context that you're operating in. That makes a difference. It's you're not just rotely going in and doing this because this is the way it's done. You have your knowledge about who you are. You have your knowledge about the environment and your ability to create the awareness that's around you. You have an understanding of how the empathy and the compassion and the kinds of things you get out of emotional intelligence can influence another person. You can see it almost from and then you overlay that with interpersonal communication, like I was doing with Margot. You can sense this person is not experience compassion or emotion. I knew Margot in that initial video show. I knew she was struggling because I knew her, but I wouldn't even have to know her. I could tell it in her nonverbal behavior. The way she related to customers is not the way a bartender normally fun-filled, enjoyable
with all live and activity.
Yeah, it's like, here's your drink, thanks a lot, boom. I got to go to the next person. I could tell because I had the training. I understand. I know what to look for. I know how to look for it. I can sense it. Once you become skilled in these areas, it's almost like you become instinctive. It's instinctive. It becomes habit in your life. And so I think the last things I would like to try to just say, and then we'll come out of this book thing. But see, here's some more links. I keep going in there and putting them in wherever wherever they're relevant.
Okay, so let's so briefly with the Renaissance of a leader and with the book. So can you give key takeaways and expectations that the audience should have in mind while anticipating to have this book at least, those very
yeah.
salient points. Yes.
Yeah, the things I have to correct here are not so much the editing inside and the continuity and things like that. That's pretty much done. It's the technical stuff of trying to make sure that table of contents gets into Apple's system the way that it'll show correctly, and that you can go onto a table of contents and link to a page like it's supposed to, which is another really big benefit for this style of book as opposed to a paperback or something like that.
Okay.
And it's another reason why I'm going with Apple, because they make it easy for you to do that. But there are some, you just have to do some formatting things. About mid-August, within the next week or two, this should be available on Apple.
Okay, that's probably before the end of the month, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
so now, what is important here, I think, is let's just put it to you this way: at the end of each chapter is a conclusion. It sort of summarizes so what I said, and then there's a series of key points. And this one, it says the last point is, a Renaissance leader understands leadership is more than a position or title. This is kind of going back to the supervisor and that service person, that customer interfacing person. The supervisor's role is often seen as an oversight role, not a leadership role, but it is a missed opportunity in a lot of companies, because if we could create that same Renaissance leader format or concept inside a supervisor, then the leader understands it's more than a position or title. It's more than a role, even. It's more than being a leader. It's actually a purpose. You have a sense of purpose for wanting to be a leader. If you don't have that, then don't go into leadership. Go into writing prompts for GPT or something. But don't be a leader.
Just go.
Don't be a leader,
man.
because what's going to happen? It's going to become part of who you are. Your persona change. Your personal persona kind of changes into a leadership persona. I mean, I've had it stated to me that Renaissance leaders, when they walk in the room, it says down there, when a Renaissance leader walks in the room, without saying a word, they have an unexplainable aura of leader around them. Somebody just
you can just see it. You can
sense it. You can almost sense it.
You don't need to be told that this person is a personality.
And that now, if that same person is telling you all of this information just with these words on a post, on a reply in social media, whatever it is, you're not going to get that aura. You can't sense that aura. I don't care how many videos they put up, memes they put up. You do not get that same sense of aura, because you're taking out in nonverbal. If we went back and looked at chapter, there's something called proxemics. Proxemic is the space between you and the other person. There's intimate space where you're like hugging each other. There's personal space where you're close to each other, like 12 inches or so. Then there's some other spaces in between there that becomes less personal the farther you get away. So there's not that sense. That's why I can remember, I'm old enough to remember when customer service, if you wanted to return something or get a problem solved, you went to the store and you met face to face with somebody who took your product back and was trying to solve the problem face to face. Now, if you're doing that with a customer service representative online, or a bot, even worse, a machine talking to people. There can't be anything worse than a machine talking to a person. But
very frustrating.
Yeah, it's kind of not just frustrating. There's just not something real.
Because the
about
limitations to conversation, the limitations to the response. So sometimes I just hit the button, lead me to what do you call it, in live chat. Let me speak with somebody.
And then they could even make it look like me and scare the hell out of people. But anyway, the idea here is you had to talk with that person, and more importantly, there was you were in some sort of a close personal space because there was just a countertop between you. Now, you can't cut somebody off. You can't block them. You can't just delete them. It's hard to be that close to a customer service person across the counter who you're trying to negotiate with and just turn around and walk away. That's extremely difficult for even the stringent of people. The people with the most rigid personality find that difficult to do. So that proximity is something that is missing out of social media. It's totally gone. Yeah, I mean, even with us, even as close as we become doing these kinds of shows together and things like that, it's just kind of impossible. And I got a little hand up there. Did I hit that hand, or did you put it?
Yeah, I think you did.
I did. Well, there's
another
example. There's another example of why that doesn't work. So it stopped me in the middle of my thought process. Now I got to go take my left brain and get it back to my right brain and get all that going. Yeah. Anyway, you kind of get the gist of this. The idea is not so much that the stuff that's in this book is new. What is kind of unique about it is integrating it all together. And what most people are not talking about that is important, because the positive intelligence and emotional intelligence cannot happen without interpersonal communication. It just cannot happen. It doesn't happen. And in many cases, that's what causes that, customer problem, say the customer service rep. I mean, they're really caught between two people. What can't happen, let me just kind of come out of this thing here. There we are. Now, all you see is me, right? Yeah. And that hand, whatever the hell that hand means.
Look, you find where they see a raise hand, you can just click on it and it
there,
go.
Yeah, there I am. Yeah, that's probably
okay.
Well, that's a trouble too, because now I'm trying to click on it. It says mute, goes up and blocks it. But the idea here is this: with that customer service rep, you can't go to the customer and say, okay, you need to change your attitude so my customer service people are experiencing a more pleasant and enjoyable environment that provides you a satisfying result. I need you to change, Vic. You can't do that. You got to change, okay? Can you do that with a customer? Have you ever did that with a customer? I mean, did you? I know.
You can't just go there to do that to a customer now, at least because they're trying to keep a customer. So why do you want to go into such questions? Yeah.
So the solution, if we're looking at this from a Renaissance perspective, innovative, new, creative, different, exciting, it isn't going to happen from the customer side. So that leaves the customer service person and the supervisor and the company, on up the ladder. So the question becomes, is that customer service rep going to be the person you turn to and say, you really need to change everything about how this works so that we can get good customer service? And they're going, I haven't been here but like 7 months. I'm not even sure I understand who runs this company. I haven't even seen an executive in this company to be able to recommend it to. Okay. So that doesn't work. So it has to come from the supervisor or the manager, or more importantly, maybe the company senior staff, if they have a real interest in changing it. So what could happen? Well, we could assess, kind of like I was explaining in the book, for an individual. If you want to understand what's going on, find out where you are first. We ran an assessment.
Okay, so a quick one, please, before we wrap up soon, because it's
Yeah.
I think it's kind of
Yeah.
plug for me. So a quick one. So what do you think would be a take from the Renaissance leader that people should anticipate for the book while they hope to get it? Because I know that this book, like I said, it's power-packed. It has a whole lot of things that has to do with communication. And even within the communication, it also implies with day-to-day life and even our personal relationship. Because talking about communication, how you actively listen to someone and be sure that what you're listening to is what you're responding to, not just listening selectively, but you listen to so that you can get the right response. So what should people expect to gain from this book? I know you've talked about a couple of stuffs about how a leader should look like, how a leader should behave, how a leader should be. But you know that what is applicable to A might not be applicable to B, might not be applicable to C. So how should people look at or view Renaissance leadership as a book so that they can apply that to their day-to-day activities? Yeah.
Yeah, let's take the most unlikely scenario to ever happen, but it would be great if it did. Let's take our supervisor who's managing that customer service group. And let's say that supervisor has 25 people who he's directly responsible for. If this person took the time to understand a little more about themselves and a little more about how to create mindsets within themselves that allowed them to be more open and see and perceive and understand what was going on in the environment that was surrounding them. So that's the positive intelligence side of it. To do that, you would have to have enough interpersonal communication skills to sense all of that. Suppose they sense that frustration in the customer service people. Suppose they heard or saw or recognized that the system for measuring the success of a customer service representative wasn't necessarily indicative or even fair in some cases. Suppose a leader could see that or sense that in their people, like I was sensing that problem with Margot, and had enough knowledge about how to do that, and then approach, and then using what they know about emotional intelligence and their positive intelligence and their communication skill to be able to approach their customer service team and say, I'd really like some input about what you think might work to take care of that. Let's just talk about the one area where you have a really tough situation that spikes your time with the customer way over the average. What would be some things that, can I get like 5 or 10 of you? Let's go somewhere, have some dinner, put up a chart, and let's just brainstorm some things that might happen that we could do to change that would make it easier for you, make your job more exciting, make it more pleasurable for the customer. Okay, so you could do that. So maybe it would be we poll several customers outside of the company norm to see that normal survey the company puts out there, nobody ever takes. You design a survey that asks some specific questions about that. Then you got the information back and it says, yeah, customers think, that would be great to have an alternative. What kind of alternatives could that be? Let's brainstorm. One of the things that might pop out of that would be, we're going to have a specific set of people hired who are highly trained to handle difficult problems, who are on call and ready for any one of us at the customer interface level. where any one of us could just immediately send this over to that Delta Force team, and they could go into action and solve that customer's problem immediately on the spot, and then give them the authority to make the decisions they need to make that happen. What if we could do that? I'm guessing we don't see many of those teams in the customer service organizations that are out there. But what would happen if that happened? That would come from a Renaissance leader saying, I'm not accepting the norm. I want something new, something creative, something innovative, something people could learn and grow. And I'm going to bring everybody into the process. In fact, let's bring in a few customers into that using Zoom and some other things. And let's do the focus groups and let's get everybody involved. Let's get everyone involved and see how that feels. Then when you put that together, you might be able to put together a plan, march it up to the senior level of the organization, say, hey, this would work. This would keep your turnover from going out the door on a regular basis. You have a few people you have to hire to handle exceptional situations. And I believe if we restructured the survey based on this customer input we got out of this group, we'll get more surveys back from those customers. It could happen. I mean, just us talking, hell, I'd try that in a lot of these places, and that's just us talking. What would happen if leadership could do that? That's some Renaissance leader thinking. That's somebody who's, some people call it out of the box, but out of the box gives it too much of a, a strange connotation. This is truly focused on some tried and true, proven concepts that work, and getting to influence people to make changes that are new, innovative, and different. That's how that works.
Okay. Victor, thank you very much for always giving out valuable information, because I know that I think I joined another room where you were part of it, and you talked about neuroscience and the whole mindset, the whole connections with humans, the whole interpersonal communication, all of that. So it's always good to have a conversation with you, and I'm sure our audience will always want to have such with you. While I'm anticipating for Renaissance leader to be finally out, probably by end of the month. Thank you very much for always praising the show, and thank you for being a part of an hour with the manager.
Okay.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah,
we hope to do this always or some other time at when we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll get some customer service out of this. But I'm the guy they have to deal with. That's kind of how I know what's going on. But
right.
Yeah,
right.
It's been a pleasure. It really has. And there are a lot of people out there. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of resources out there that we can draw on. It's not like we don't have the resources to make this kind of thing happen. There are just a lot of them out there, and they're all good. I know I see them on LinkedIn every day. I hear them on LinkedIn every day. So I know the resources are out there to make it happen. It's just getting it pulled together that's going to be the key.
Right. Thank you very much. That is why we have you, and I would say you are the man for that. And I'm hoping maybe at the end of the book you're going to have maybe a survey. At least so people can as well, maybe write the feedback on what they've been able to gain from it.
You can bet I'll announce it on LinkedIn when it hits Apple. So
definitely, I trust you to do that.
Right.
I trust you to do that.
Thank you very much. You have a good evening.
Thank you very much for everything. Yeah, and you too.